Well, last time we had a look at West Africa and we pointed out the countries that Raila Odinga chose to go and visit and speak to their foreign ministers and presidents regarding his AUC bid. Well, this time we want to look at East Africa. Currently, Raila is in West Africa. He has already visited Benin, as we had spoke about Benin. He is currently in Ghana, as also we said that Ghana is very important, Nigeria as well, Senegal, and other countries that we pointed out. You can check the video in the comment section below. I will have pinned that message in the comment section. Well, today we are looking at our home region, that is East Africa. What Raila Odinga has in East Africa, which countries are going to support Raila Odinga in East Africa, as well as country by country, we are going to map out. We are going to have our region from south in Tanzania all the way to north in Sudan. We're also going to look at very east Somalia up to the very west, that is Burundi and Rwanda. We're not going to factor in Congo at now, DRC. We are going to look at DRC Congo as part of Central Africa, because I know we have East Africa community, then we have East Africa region. So we want to look at it as a region and not as a political entity as the EAC. So the East Africa region is the home ground of Raila Odinga. It is also the home ground of all other candidates that are vying for the AUC chairperson. This is because the AU gave that resolution that now we are going to have the AU leaders coming from different regions so that there can be representation from all these regions to the Africa Union top seat. So this is the chance of the Eastern African countries to give a leader who will be the next AUC chairperson, and the vice chairperson for that matter. The vice will come from the Northern African states. We're talking about Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, and what have you, all the countries in the Northern African region. So when we are talking about the Eastern Africa, we're going to touch on these countries that I have mentioned, Tanzania, Kenya, Burundi, Rwanda. We're going to talk about Uganda, Somalia, Djibouti. We're going also to talk about Eritrea, Sudan, South Sudan, and Sudan. And we're also going to talk about Ethiopia. So these are the countries that we're going to cover in this session. Just going to look at how they have been voting and the likelihood of them to vote for Raila Odinga or not, because not the entire region is going to vote for Raila Odinga. Mind you, the launch of the bid of Raila Odinga and the leaders who came or leaders who are invited in that meeting or from the East Africa community as a political entity. So it was not from the Eastern African region. That's why Ethiopia did not come. That's why Sudan was not represented. That is why Eritrea did not come to that meeting, because it was from the East African community as a political entity. Now we're looking at the region. So those are two separate entities, and we're going to start with Tanzania.
It is with all this in mind that the government of the United Republic of Tanzania endorses the candidature of Right Honorable I'll repeat. It is with all this in mind that the government of the United Republic of Tanzania endorses the candidature of Right Honorable Raila Odinga for the position of chairperson of the African Union Commission.
Well, this is Bonafide. If you haven't subscribed yet, kindly subscribe and leave a comment about this discussion of how you think Raila is going to fare on in East Africa region. Well, Tanzania has been very, very close to Kenya. We have very rich culture with Tanzania. It is the country in the world that we can easily fit in because we share a language, we share our culture. Our music is played in Tanzania and the music of Tanzania is played here in Kenya. It is very easy for Tanzania to be in sync with Kenya. And that also goes politically, as we've seen the president of Tanzania frequently making comments about what is happening in Kenya, similar to the president of Kenya having cordial relations with the president of Tanzania. And that relationship has been taken a notch higher, even in the last AUC elections where Kenya participated through Amina Mohamed. We saw Tanzania sticking with Kenya to the last end, and that just shows you that it will be easy for Tanzania to support Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga was very, very close with the former Tanzanian president, John Pombe Magufuli. John Pombe Magufuli even came to Kenya at one time to greet Raila Odinga. When Raila Odinga lost his son Fidel, John Pombe Magufuli, at that time not a president, came to Kenya to condole with Raila Odinga. So John Pombe Magufuli was the president of Tanzania before his demise, and the deputy president at that time, or the vice president, was Samia Suluhu, who is now the president of Tanzania. So that relationship between Raila Odinga and John Pombe Magufuli at that time perhaps may have transferred even to the relationship that Raila Odinga will have with Samia Suluhu, because they were president and vice, and I'm sure the president and vice will have communications, and the relationship can be passed down to the current president in Tanzania. So it will be very easy by the virtue of personal relations. It will be very easy by the virtue of the relationship that the diplomatic relations that Kenya has with Tanzania. And remember, when we had the finance bill last year, not this year's finance bill crisis, and there were maandamanos everywhere in Kenya, it is the Tanzanian president who came to Kenya secretly. There was that leakage of news that she came to Kenya secretly to speak to both President Ruto and Raila Odinga. So you can see the relations between Kenya and Tanzania and the likeliness of President Samia Suluhu to vote for Raila Odinga.
It is on this note that the United Republic of Tanzania assures Republic of Kenya of its full support for the candidature of Right Honorable Raila Odinga for the position of African Union Commission chairperson, and Tanzania says, Baba anatosha, achaguliwe. Asante sana.
Now let's move forward to Uganda.
Before he came, there was a young man from Djibouti. He came and told me that he was the one who was the candidate for Djibouti. After I told him that I was coming here to support Right Honorable Raila, because he's a candidate who is fit for this job.
Uganda is perhaps Kenya's also closest neighbor, because we share a lot with Uganda, and the relationship between Kenya and Uganda spans for a very long time. In fact, from independence, we have been very close to Uganda, and the relationship between Yoweri Museveni and President Ruto also goes way back, and that is the relationship that can cultivate the closeness and the likeliness of Yoweri Museveni to vote for Raila Odinga when the AUC elections will be held next year, February 2025. If you remember very well, this journey for Raila Odinga to vie for the AUC chairperson, it is likely that it started in Uganda. There was that meeting, that famous meeting when President Ruto, Raila Odinga, and Yoweri Museveni met in Kampala, and they had talks that were not revealed to us, but it was after that time that we saw the cordial relationship between Raila Odinga and President Ruto coming to fruition, and they were now sort of like brothers. It was simply a handshake that was made in Uganda. So perhaps by that virtue, they spoke about everything that is going on in Kenya and everything that can happen now from Raila Odinga's possible exit from politics. And it is possible that the idea was brewed in Uganda. So it will be very easy for Uganda to vote for Kenya. Mind you, last time when Amina Mohamed was vying for AUC, Uganda left us at the second round. So I believe this time, because now this idea seems to come from Yoweri Kaguta Museveni himself, he will stick with Kenya to the last round when all votes will have to be counted. That will be very, very important for him to stick to the end. And I believe because of his involvement, his great involvement in this, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni will stick with Raila Odinga come February 2025. But let's move forward to Rwanda, and we're going to handle them as two, Rwanda and Burundi. Well, in that launch of the bid, Rwanda and Burundi did not show up with their presidents. They only sent their foreign ministers. That is something to ponder about, but it is not something to be alarmed about. Rwanda has one major concern when it comes to AU. It is not even a matter of Francophone or Anglophone. We know where Rwanda stands. Rwanda has an issue with the DRC they say that the Rwandese are in DRC fighting the FARC, that is the Federal Army of the DRC. So that is the issue with Rwanda, and that is the issue that Rwanda will need Raila Odinga to address and come out clear about. Perhaps that is something that Raila Odinga will have to iron out very clearly with Rwanda's President Paul Kagame, because there is that issue, and I believe that will be the most contentious issue for Raila Odinga to handle, because DRC is accusing Rwanda of meddling in its internal affairs. Then Burundi sides with DRC most of the time. That is where Burundi now has an issue with Rwanda. They close their borders. So these two are countries to watch. Perhaps that one can vote for Raila Odinga and one will not, because it is a matter of who is going to be satisfied with the principles that Raila Odinga is going to offer. It is also important to note that these two countries are part of the East African community, and that is a good thing for Raila Odinga, because as a political entity, they can decide to set their differences aside and have a person from the community who will be the AUC chairperson. It will be easy to communicate their grievances to. So by that virtue, it is possible for these two countries to vote for Raila Odinga. But if they hold their differences much more weightier than the East African community as a political region, then it is likely that one may vote for Raila Odinga and the other might not vote for Raila Odinga. So that is the issue with Rwanda and Burundi, and DRC coming in with a lot of conflict in between those three countries. Now let's go up north and east to look at countries that border Kenya and countries that are part of the East Africa region, the Eastern African region. Well, let us start with Somalia, our neighbor to the east. Well, Somalia's issue is a bit shaky because of the relationship between Somalia and Somaliland. Somalia has been in conflict since 1991, all through till now. There is still some conflict with the Al-Shabaab and everything. So a lot is happening in Somalia regarding instability and the fact that Somalia is divided into four main countries in one country, but seriously divided to two main countries, that even one held elections just last week and a leader was elected, an opposition leader was elected in Somaliland. We have the larger Somalia, we have Somaliland, and by the way, Somalia borders Djibouti. So when we are talking about a country that may not support Raila Odinga, that will be Somalia, because there are allegations that Raila Odinga is likely to support the secession of Somaliland from Somalia, and that is a conversation that Somalia doesn't like to hear. And that now is going to put us to discuss about Ethiopia, which borders Kenya to the north, part of the East Africa region. And Ethiopia, just at the beginning of the year, had relations with Somaliland. For the first time, a country had diplomatic relations with the secession or the seceding part of Somalia, that is Somaliland. And to Somaliland, that was a great move, but to Somalia, that was something that should never have happened, and it brought a lot of diplomatic conflicts between Somalia and Ethiopia. Well, Ethiopia signed a deal with Somaliland to have a strip of land at the coast to host its naval base. Ethiopia has always wanted a coastline. You know that Eritrea seceded from Ethiopia and Eritrea became its own country. That was Ethiopia's corridor to the sea, and now Ethiopia is landlocked. Ethiopia has been using the ports in Djibouti. It has been using the Lamu port from Kenya, sometimes the Mombasa port from Kenya, to ferry its goods all the way to Ethiopia. And because Ethiopia now doesn't have an outlet, a sea outlet, it has been looking at avenues where it can have a better sea access and a place where goods will come in from the rest of the world and go to Ethiopia with the limited time possible. So the thing that Somaliland really wants is to be recognized as an independent country. It has not yet been recognized by the African Union. It has not yet been recognized by the UN as a country on its own. So it really needs that recognition. And when Ethiopia approached Somaliland to have that deal, that was some sort of recognition, because now you're signing deals with a country, with another country. That is something that only countries do. So the fact that that happened really angered Mogadishu. And that is why we have a diplomatic spat between Mogadishu and Addis Ababa. Mind you, it is very important to note that Somaliland has been independent for 30 good years, 3 decades. Somaliland has governed itself, has had its own presidents, has been working on its own from 30 good years from Somalia. So that is something that is also important to note. And where does Raila Odinga come in all this? There are allegations that Raila Odinga is likely to support Somaliland to become independent from Somalia. So that is why Somalia is a bit jittery with Raila Odinga's candidacy, because there's a time that Raila Odinga made statements. There's a time that Raila Odinga even went to Somaliland. So that brings up the fear that if Raila Odinga becomes the AUC leader, he can support Somaliland from seceding, and Somalia doesn't want that conversation. That is why Raila Odinga may not get the support he needs from Somalia. And by the way, Djibouti also borders the larger Somalia, and also we've had quite a series of diplomatic issues with Somalia, from the triangle to the sea where Kenya ends and Somalia begins. We even took that matter to the ICC. We've had other diplomatic issues with Somalia. So as much as Somalia is our good neighbor, it is likely that Somalia may not support Raila Odinga's candidacy for the AUC chairperson. Then let's go to Ethiopia, because Ethiopia is now locked in between all these diplomatic issues. And as much as Ethiopia would like Somaliland to be on its own so that it can have that coastal strip, Ethiopia also has very close relations with Djibouti. In fact, in the vote for the UNSC between Kenya and Djibouti, Ethiopia supported Djibouti. So Ethiopia is in between choosing whether to have Raila Odinga that may support Somaliland so that it can have its own port, and the close relations that Ethiopia has with Djibouti, because Ethiopia has been using the Djiboutian port for quite some time, and that port is very, very fundamental for Ethiopia right now. So it is likely that Ethiopia may set aside all scenarios that may happen to have a scenario that is happening, that is, Ethiopia is dependent on Djibouti right now. And Djibouti will use that as a leverage and say that, we support you through our ports, you ferry goods from our ports, maybe at a discount. So we also want you to support our bid for the AUC. So Ethiopia is likely to lean towards Djibouti when it comes to the diplomatic vote. Then let us look at Djibouti. Of course, Djibouti will vote for its own candidate. Already it has supported its candidate for the AUC bid. It has declared its candidate for the AUC bid. It is likely that Djibouti will support the foreign minister, that is Muhammad Ali, for AUC candidate. Not much to talk about there. Well, Djibouti also has another neighbor called Eritrea. And that is a very, very important aspect to look at, because the last time when Kenya and Djibouti were vying for the UNSC, Eritrea voted for Kenya. It did not vote for its neighbor, its own immediate neighbor. And that is similar issues that Kenya has with Somalia, is a similar issue that is facing Djibouti with its neighbor, Eritrea, that they have conflict, they have diplomatic conflicts that just makes Eritrea to even think about voting for someone else than its own immediate neighbor. So it is likely, if all remains the same, it is likely that Eritrea will support Kenya for the AUC bid. It's likely that the president of Eritrea will vote for Raila Odinga for AUC chairperson. Then let us go to South Sudan. South Sudan, of course, the leader of South Sudan, Salva Kiir, is the chairperson of the East African Community right now. The position of the East African Community is that they will support Raila Odinga. So from the chairman, I think that will have to be seen, leading by example. So the chairman will have to support Raila Odinga on this, because his hands are tied. His hands are tied as the chairman of the political region of East African Community. Therefore, it is likely that South Sudan will support Raila Odinga. Then let us finish up with Sudan. Sudan is likely not to participate in these elections because it has been banned from the AU activities due to the instability in the country. There is no one definitive leader of Sudan as we speak. There is a serious civil war in Sudan that has led to the loss of lives of thousands of people. And is a matter that has to really be in the headlines of news across the world, because many people are suffering in Sudan. So Sudan will not be taking part in the vote. And that is a vote lost for our candidates in East Africa, be it Raila Odinga or Mohamed Yusuf. that is a vote lost, and that is a sad situation that has to be rectified as soon as possible. So Sudan will not participate in the elections in 2025 if no particular issue has been solved. Well, if we look at Sudan previously, Sudan has voted for Djibouti even in the UNSC, so that is mostly a loss to the Djiboutian candidates. If Sudan was in a stable condition, it is possible that Sudan would have voted for Mohamed Yusuf. So that is the situation in East Africa as at now, because everything changes in a few moments' time. So we are still going to look at this and have a review of it later on. But as we stand, that is how the Eastern African region looks. That is how it is likely to vote. And you can tell by the distribution of votes how these countries will fare on. There's a very, very tight race that all these leaders will need their votes banked and assured. They will need to go and visit these countries and assure them of their support. For example, Raila Odinga can visit Somalia and assure Somalia of his support, that Somalia should not be worried, etc. This is how Raila Odinga can campaign to this president. It is very, very difficult, by the way, to campaign to these presidents. They have long-standing issues that are very rigid. Sometimes someone even might not even consider even having talks. So when Raila Odinga goes to meet these presidents, this is what they talk about. What is your opinion? What is your policy on the issue that we have with Somaliland? What is your policy on the issue that we have with Kenya on this and this particular policy? So these are the issues that are very pertinent, and that is why Raila Odinga has to visit these particular countries with the foreign secretaries and table these issues and say that if I'm going to become the AUC leader, I am not going to touch this, but I'm going to touch this and this. So these assurances are what Raila Odinga is looking for when he's going to speak with presidents. It is not as easy as Francophony and Anglophony. There are policies inside between these countries that are even greater than Anglophony and just Francophony. It is not as simple as Anglophony and Francophony and Organization of Africa and whatever. It is never that simple. So it is important for these leaders to iron out the issues, the worries that these countries have, so that they can get their support for the AUC. So that has been a review of the East African region. What do you have? What is your comment about the East Africa region? What do you think maybe I have said that is not right, that can go another way? Kindly comment in the comment section below. And I'll see you on the next one on different regions and their support for the AUC candidates.